Welcome to Charts Today. My name's David Linton, and today's edition for Tuesday, the 4th of June, comes to you from London. And we start by looking at the dollar index sinking lower here. So we are seeing that sentiment just weighing more heavily on the dollar, which means that the Eurodollar is actually looking stronger against the dollar on that short-term chart. It has removed one of the 5 downside targets that we had, just little one here, but we still do have these 4 downside targets hanging over us. Against the yen, the dollar is also looking weaker, and this is really yen strength is where we're really seeing it show up. And interestingly, these charts are turning bearish for the dollar on the long term and the medium term chart. So the yen with a further 1.2% downside, so the yen looking strong, dollar looking weaker. Sterling sitting at 127 against the dollar, and so we're starting to look a little bit better on that dollar weakness. And against the euro, sterling sitting at 112, just sinking further away there. So the euro benefiting from dollar weakness, but not sterling as much. Against the Swiss franc, sterling is sitting at 126 and is bearish on all 3 time frames there. Bitcoin sitting at $7,900, $7,900, did sell off quite heavily at the end of yesterday overnight. We've seen that big fall there. Still looking bullish on this medium-term chart, but short-term we have a downside target of 13%, so we might well see some sell-off there. The S&P 500 index didn't do as badly as the future indicated yesterday, and we did actually manage to recover some ground, but we still closed down 1/3%, and the tech-laden Nasdaq was sold off pretty heavily. We had some pretty big falls on some of the key stocks there. Nasdaq actually now off more than 10% from its April peak. So interestingly, we are really seeing that capitulation building. Downside targets of 1 and 4%, 7% on that medium-term chart. So the market actually looking pretty bearish on a lot of tech stocks. And as I say, we'll look at the individual tech stocks in a minute. The Dow also just slightly lower, and the Russell 2000 index, the broader based index, also just struggling and still in bearish territory and entering medium-term bearish territory as well. We are seeing the futures looking a little bit brighter this morning. The S&P future up 0.4%, the Nasdaq E-mini up just under 0.5%. So we may see the market just recovering a little bit today. The UK market down 0.25% this morning. So we are just seeing that carrying on into the UK, and the 250 also looking lower this morning as well. The DAX is off 0.2%, so we are again just seeing small moves there, and the CAC Current down 0.3%. As well. Japan was slightly lower overnight, and the Hang Seng was down 0.5%. China actually down 1%. So we are still seeing the global sell-off having an impact here on sentiment, and China is still looking quite bearish. The Sensex in India has been stronger than most other markets of late. It was down very slightly overnight, but still looking bullish on all 3 time frames. And the Aussie market did actually manage to close up. There was a cut in interest rates there to an historic low of 1.25%, so that helped the market. Brent crude down slightly, it's just sitting at the $61 level, looking much more bearish than it has done, and we're seeing here that we've moved into that bearish territory on the medium term chart. Downside target now here of 57.12, but we've not yet activated that, so we did see a little bit of a seesaw on the price yesterday that has given us this downside target. WTI sitting at $53.27. A downside target here of 49.51, again not activated. A move below $50 would be psychologically important for WTI. US nat gas sitting at $2.41 in the doldrums very much, and bucking the trend on that weaker dollar is the gold price sitting at $1,328, breaking to medium-term bearish, bullish, and long-term bullish. We're starting to see now that this consolidation pattern that we've seen, now the lagging line moving quite clearly. Just the seesaw of uncertainty, now we're starting to be in bullish territory. So gold looking quite strong. A shortage of upside targets on the short-term chart, but we are seeing targets as high as 1348 on the medium-term chart. This 1350 level would be quite critical. The level that we saw in 2018, if we break above that and hold it, that would be very strong for gold. Silver also looking bullish as we might expect on that stronger gold price, and US 10-year yields down to 2.09%. So really just holding below that 210 level. All eyes on the 2% mark. Taking a look at the individual stocks, this data all coming from Thomson Reuters Icon, or if you're a private user, Metastock Zenith. Brilliant global system. If you're looking at the here we're looking at the individual stocks, and for this I'm using the Yahoo Finance data. Just looking at the indices here, we saw the Nasdaq was down 2%, and interestingly, we'll look at some of the stocks that drove that. The Dow was just up slightly yesterday, so we did have a lot of rises, but the tech stocks were really hit quite hard, and we'll look at the individual ones there. U.S. antitrust legislators starting to look more heavily at tech stocks, and that meant we saw some very big falls on the market. Facebook down 7.5% on that news yesterday, really just unwinding any good that we've seen in the share price there. So really just a big move to the downside there. Google also suffering down 6%. Amazon down 4.6%. So a lot of these majors really struggling. Tesla also down to that 178 level. Remember saying recently 250 was the support level. Well, they fell through that 250 level and have capitulated, and we've underperformed the market by 45% so far this year, looking at the relative to the Dow. So really falling away there. There were some rises yesterday, but not many. We saw Amgen up 3.4%. And Kraft Heinz up 2.7%. So really quite key there. A lot of these Nasdaq stocks not doing as well. Taking a look at the Aussie market, we see here that we have Metcash up 3.4%, and on the downside we've had Brothers Solutions down a massive 11%, unwinding a lot of a big rise there. They were outperforming the market by 14%. They unwound a lot of that yesterday, disappointing the market. China, we said, was down 1%, so we saw a handful of good performances there, but we saw quite a few stocks down 3 and 4% there. So that really affecting things. India was a mixed picture. We saw NTPC with the best performer at 1.6%. That chart's starting just to look like it might be breaking out. On the downside, we did have Hero Motorcorp, which was strong the day before, sitting at 2.8% lower. Their relative not looking as good so far this year, and then we see the live prices coming in from Yahoo Finance. Looking at Europe, taking a look at the UK market first of all, we start by looking at EasyJet. They're up 3.5% this morning. Its chart looks dismal still, underperforming the market so far this year by 25%. That's the Dow. And if we look at the Standard Life, we see here underperforming by 2.8%, up 2.8%, but just underperforming by 3%. Still quite a bearish looking chart. Looking at the worst performers, Hargreaves Lansdown down a further 5% this morning. Financials been pretty badly hit here. Ocado Group down 2.8%, and Sage Group also just struggling, but really has been performing very straight line over the last several months. So really quite a strong performance, outperforming the Dow Jones by 15%. Shortage of activated upside targets there, though. Taking a look at the FTSE 250, if we look here, we see we start with Metrobank. They're up 5% this morning, but boy, what a roller coaster of a ride it's been for Metrobank. Still underperforming the market by 64% so far this year, just reading off that number there. Looking at the downside target, downside potential, Wooden Patent Capital Trust down 12.8%. A lot in the news at the moment, of course, and so that's really has affected them. Ted Baker down a further 3.3%. That chart still looking pretty worrying on the bearish side with downside targets. Taking a look, last of all, at European major stocks. If we look at the best performers, we've got Unibail, Westfield, they're up 2.5%. Daimler Group in Germany up 2.5% as well. Chart's still looking pretty bearish. ING, they're up 2.5%. And if we look at the downside targets here, the downside potential, we've got SAP in Germany. They're the worst performer in the Eurostoxx 50, down 2% this morning. So we are still seeing Europe being quite hit. Germany is actually looking a bit stronger, and we are seeing that showing through in the better performers here. A lot of the DE stocks, the German stocks, clicking through. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, happy charting. See you then.